Hello, everyone, and welcome to Sovereign Lovestream.
Hello, happy Sunday.
How's everybody doing out there in the interwebs? Having a good day so far? A good weekend so far? We hope so. Hit us up in the comments and let us know what you're thinking about what we're talking about. We want this to be an interactive show, so please feel free and welcome to join in and enter into the commentary. Do you want to introduce the topic?
Sure, I guess so. Today we are talking about all of the ego traps that we experience within our relationships, how they can totally mess with our relationships, mess with our views of the relationships that we're in, and not just romantic partnerships, but all of our relationships. Our egos can be really tricky.
I like to say they run psyops on us. My ego is really tricky. It takes on many different personas and runs all kinds of psyops on me. And all of the psyops are designed for one purpose. Well, I shouldn't say that they're designed for one purpose because I think our ego is well-meaning, right?
Yeah.
Ultimately, our ego is trying to protect us from pain. It's trying to keep us from getting hurt. The problem is that sometimes in the process of trying to protect us, it puts up walls, and those walls keep us from experiencing love to the fullest extent that we could.
Yeah. I think that, yeah, you're absolutely right. The ego's intention is to protect us. We learn at a very young age to defend ourselves against the uncomfortable feelings, and we build walls in order to do that. And then, of course, once we enter a relationship and we want to feel the full extent of the love flowing through our relationship, it's almost impossible because there's all these walls standing in between you and the other person, you and love itself, and from experiencing love just flowing through you. So, like Danny said, it can run all sorts of psyops, and there are moments where you think you're not in your ego, and then you come to find out, holy crap, that is totally my ego making me think that it's not my ego anymore. So it can be very tricky. We like to also call it a petty tyrant. And sometimes you have to go hunting for your petty tyrant to discover all the areas in which it's hiding and hijacking your relationships. So that's our topic today.
Yeah, I tend to not like the idea of calling your ego a petty tyrant because I think there's a lot of, I tend to be very judgmental, mostly of myself. And then because I judge myself so harshly, I try to hold other people to that same standard and end up judging other people as well. And I think the petty tyrant is like giving me an excuse to judge myself, right? Like, oh, my ego's a tyrant. So I prefer now to think of my ego as my inner child and treat it that way. Like, I have a 9-year-old, and sometimes, not so much anymore, but when he was little especially, if you think of yourself as a 5-year-old throwing a temper tantrum because you want something or you need something, and kids don't always have a productive way of expressing themselves. If they're hungry, they get cranky, and they may not even realize that they're hungry. Xander would not be hungry. He would not express he was hungry, and then all of a sudden he's like, "Oh, I'm starving." Well, why didn't you tell me when you first felt hungry an hour ago, right? And I think our ego can be like that sometimes, where it doesn't really know how to communicate. So it's really like a 5-year-old. And I think it's very connected. I haven't studied Freud too much, but I think it's very connected to kind of the reptilian brain, which is basically doesn't really see things in very distinct ways. It just kind of sees archetypes or kind of the shadows. It's almost like one of the books I've read, actually we both read that we've talked about on this show before, Getting the Love You Want, talks about how your reptilian brain kind of classifies people into a couple of different categories. And I'm not sure if I'm going to remember them all, but the main categories are kind of like the person that's going to nurture you. So this would kind of be like your wife or your mother, your grandmother, and even maybe your male grandparents and father. The person that's a threat to you, the person you want to mate with, right? And there were 5 altogether. I don't remember them all. But these kind of classifications trigger how you respond to somebody, right? On a very like subconscious, primal level.
Yeah, it's very instinctual and it happens in a matter of seconds. So it's not something that you're like looking at people and saying, "Oh, this person fits under that category." It's just something that your brain automatically recognizes and makes a decision.
Yeah, so it's kind of like when Vanessa and I get into an argument, my reptilian if she yells at me, my reptilian brain signals, "She's a threat. She's a threat. Ego, come in and protect us from this threat." And so ego comes in and says, and wants to get aggressive, yells back or says something nasty to hurt her so that she retreats away from me. Like these are all the kind of things that our ego can do. So as a couple, we've committed to each other to hold each other accountable. So of course, obviously, we try to do that in an empathetic and a loving way. But sometimes when you're in your ego, when your ego kind of has taken over because it feels threatened, it's hard to receive that accountability. And the accountability can be interpreted by the ego as an attack as well.
Yeah, even if it's in the most loving way. Anything that's trying to get the ego to simmer down, to not be in control, is a threat to the ego. And so you can be saying the nicest words to the person, but if the ego feels threatened, it's going to double down and it's going to, stomp its feet and throw a temper tantrum on many occasions, not always, but
and so my idea is, or kind of the way I've learned to look at it, is not so much as the ego needs to be killed or beaten, but that the ego needs to be loved. If we love the ego, if we soothe the ego, it'll calm down just like a child, and we can go along our business. Now all of this is happening. It's a practice that takes a lot of discipline, and I'm not there yet. I'm the first one to admit it. It takes a lot of practice because you have to do all of this in a moment. Vanessa says something to me. Reptilian brain says danger. Ego says where? Let me fight it. And in that moment, I have to choose to take a breath, observe what's happening, say, whoa, whoa, whoa. It's okay, reptilian brain. It's okay, ego. She's not a threat to us. She's not attacking. She's just trying to communicate something. I'm sorry, honey. What was that you said? Because I was having this internal battle right now. And obviously you don't really have to say that out loud, but kind of that's what I try to tell myself. So this weekend we had a pretty bad, well, it's a minor thing, but it turned into a bigger argument than it had to because I was in my ego. I knew I was in my ego, and I just chose not to subdue my ego, not to soothe it. I just let it throw its temper tantrum. And, it effed with our relationship. And the crazy thing is that it wasn't even Vanessa really that was triggering my ego. It was an argument on the internet. It was an argument on Facebook that triggered it. And it triggered another childhood wound. So I'll take you through the process of what happened. So I'm having these debates online with some of the people in my neighborhood group. And, I don't like the term anti-vax because it's like negative, but I'm pro holistic natural medicine, plant medicine. I don't believe in vaccines. I don't necessarily think vaccines it doesn't matter. Point is, the people in the group, especially amongst COVID, are like so nervous. They're all like vaccines, vaccines, vaccines. So basically, I've gotten a reputation now where they know I'm an anti-vaxxer, and they basically have a couple of people were making comments saying, "Oh, he's an anti-vaxxer. Don't listen to anything he has to say on anything." I was talking about government surveillance of protesters, which they all agree with, but yet because of my anti-vax stance, they were kind of bullying me, right? I felt bullied, at least. And what I realized is that this went back to when I was in grammar school. I was like kind of the class clown. I had a big mouth, and as I do now, and I couldn't stay quiet. And so I was considered a bad kid. I was put in the back corner of the classroom, away from all the other students. I was ostracized in the back by the slop sink. And I had my permanent desk back there, and I really wasn't, and so a lot of my peers, a lot of the kids in school would make fun of me and kind of like, point the finger. And that's what it felt like. My ego in that moment, that all these people in this group were kind of ganging up on me just because I like natural medicine. I felt like that, like I was in 5th grade again, and all the kids were laughing at me and telling the teacher that, I was acting up or whatever, like telling on me. So, this one particular woman who kind of was basically calling for me to be censored because of my opinions. She was commenting on another thread about something else, not even on the same topic. And I basically said, well, maybe we should ask this person if they believe in natural medicine, because then we know we can just ignore their, like, I was being sarcastic. And I had said to Vanessa, I had read her comment, and before I typed that answer, that sarcastic comment, I said to myself, I want to say this, but I know it's not the empathetic thing. I know it's not going to help the situation. It's not going to bring any unity or understanding. It's just, I know that this is my ego just wanting to like say something nasty because of the way she hurt me. And I said that to Vanessa, and then I stopped talking about it, and I was just sitting there getting aggravated at how she had spoken about me. And I said, you know what? I quietly, I didn't tell Vanessa, I typed out the comment and I sent it. And I was like, yeah, take that. How many times are you arguing on Facebook and getting into a debate, and you feel like you're right ideologically, and so you have that attitude, right? It happens to me all the time. It doesn't happen to me all the time. I choose to do that a lot, and I'm really trying not to, because I really do believe that empathy is the best way to communicate these ideas. Bullying somebody or being sarcastic and like, just being nasty until they back down is not going to change their mind about the issue. It may just make them back out of the argument. And what good is that? You haven't changed their mind. So Vanessa calls me out. And basically my ego just literally, I raised my voice and I was like, yeah, I know. You always have to call me out. You can never take my side. Couldn't you just give me this? She was such a bitch to me. She deserves it, and yeah, I know it was the wrong thing, but, just give me a break. And it turned into an argument, and she went in the other room because she was like, this dude is just throwing his temper tantrum, and nothing I say right now is going to make any difference. We argued for a few minutes, and then she was like, I'm out. So, and then I was in here stewing in it in my own, like, angry. Now I'm angry at her for walking out on me like I'm the problem. Obviously, these bullies on the internet are the problem. It's not me. But obviously, I knew from the start that it was the wrong thing to do. I knew from the start. And maybe there's people in the audience saying, yeah, but it was justified. It's not that big of a deal. And maybe it isn't that big of a deal. The comment itself, I doubt the girl went and killed herself over it. But it was the wrong decision for me. It was bad for me. Somebody just made a comment online about... what's the saying? Hating somebody or
being angry is like
drinking poison and expecting the other person to be harmed.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's really what I was doing. I was drinking the poison and acting like I was sticking it to her. And she doesn't know me. She doesn't care what I think, probably. Like, right? I mean, here I am taking it personally. I'm like that 5-year-old, that 5th grader again, being like, oh, the whole class is ganging up on me. And I'm going to get my revenge now.
And she has absolutely no idea why this guy is taking her comments so seriously.
So not only did I fall into an ego trap and let my ego run wild, I allowed that ego trap with somebody else to come between me and Vanessa. And so then for the rest of the night, things were like tense. And until like I finally was willing to apologize, it's like, it's tension. And that's like wasted time. That was like a Saturday night that was ruined because, or whatever
Friday
day,
night,
whatever day it was, that was ruined because I was just being a child. and now we didn't really spend that time together, and then we kind of went to bed. I think we settled it before we went to bed, but it was still a little awkward.
We kind of just agreed to disagree because there was still a moment where Danny was like, yeah, I know it was wrong, but I don't really care. I'm not sorry.
Honestly, I didn't feel sorry about it. And so I was trying to and I couldn't think of a way to make myself feel sorry for it. So I don't know. I guess time just had to pass for my ego to legit calm down so that I could just be like, yeah, all right. I was being totally childish. I get that.
And I think one of the things that is a struggle, right, in a situation like that is, oh yeah.
Absolutely, Derek.
Yeah.
It absolutely is. But it's very difficult to integrate that. And especially for me, coming out of the activist community. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No,
Go ahead.
no.
Finish what you were saying.
I think I lost my train of thought now.
I'm sorry.
Go.
Well, what I was going to say was coming from the activist community, like being in activism for the last decade, activism tends to be a very ego-driven thing. Like we tell ourselves that we want to wake up the masses and we want to help people and we want to change the world for the better, but we're not willing to change ourselves. We're not willing to step out of that ego where I'm right and I'm going to beat you over the head with my facts or my philosophy until you admit I'm right. Rather than if we're doing it because we love people and we want to wake people up because we all want to be free and we want to have a better society, then empathy and compassion is really the way we have to communicate. Otherwise, we're hypocrites. And, but that's what we've been doing, right? A lot of us, we're not just keyboard activists. We're doing stuff on the street. I was cop blocking and cop watching and doing all those things, running for office and holding protests and all that type of stuff. But then, if I'm confronted in the street by somebody who doesn't agree with my protest sign or whatever, am I screaming at them or am I trying to have a compassionate dialogue where maybe I can change their minds, right? People don't care what you know until they know that you care. So you have to use empathy and compassion to establish that rapport before they're even willing to trust you enough to open up to you. So now this girl in my neighborhood group, she's like, oh, this dude's an anti-vaxxer. We can't even listen to him. Me just throwing arrows at her doesn't change her mind. But if I were to say, hey, listen, I just tend to think that, natural medicine is preferable to me than putting chemicals in my body, whatever. She looked like a hipster. She probably, when I phrased it that way, she may have said, oh, yeah, well, I'm a vegan, or, who knows? It could have led to a productive dialogue at least, where she could have at least, even if she didn't agree with me, she could have at least respected my views. But instead, ego said, take a hike, woman.
And I mean, I'm guessing if she's encountered any other anti-vax activists who have a similar mentality, it's very hard for her to be willing to listen to anybody's message at that point. And I mean, having that reaction, reiterates that for her and confirms what she knows.
Yeah.
These people aren't willing to be empathetic or have a conversation. If I don't like what they say, they're just gonna be nasty to me or dismiss me. And one of the things that I was saying, as a matter of fact, yesterday we were having the conversation more peacefully. I was saying we don't know what her interactions have been with other anti-vaxxers. We don't know who she's met, who has tried to convince her. Sometimes when we believe that our way is the right way, we tell other people their way is the wrong way. So if somebody doesn't believe in vaccines, comes up to her and tells her, well, you're a horrible mom because you're poisoning your kids, she's not going to be willing to listen to someone who's calling her a bad mom. She's not going to, there's nothing in that situation that's going to open her up to wanting to listen to another point of view.
Yeah, for sure. It's a hard lesson for me to learn, and I'm trying to develop the discipline to do it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think especially, I think on the internet, it's easy to find all sorts of people, and it's going to be, it's easy to find people that are going to trigger you. No matter where you are, you'll find people that will trigger your childhood wounds, and your partner especially is going to trigger your wounds. That's one of the main reasons you end up choosing that partner.
Yeah. What else? What other examples of ego traps do we have?
Um, I think sometimes it's hard to empathize with another person when you are in your ego, because I think it creates this sensation or this idea that if another person is hurting, let's say if Danny's hurt by something I said, Danny tends to be very uncomfortable with sarcasm, and I am a very sarcastic person.
She is.
I like sarcastic humor, and so even when I'm joking around, when I'm playing around, and I use sarcasm playfully, it triggers something in him. And there are moments where I want to defend that. I'm not hurting you. I'm not saying anything mean. I'm being playful. I'm, like, I don't understand why you're getting so offended by my sarcasm. But the truth is, I'm not empathizing with him in those moments. I am sticking to this idea that I didn't do anything to hurt you. So why are you hurt by my behavior if I didn't do it intentionally? And that can be very tricky. There's this righteous idea that, we're just playing around. If we can play around with each other, why should sarcasm be so hurtful? Why would you get offended by such a thing? It's silly. I don't know, maybe there is some sort of trauma there. Maybe there is somebody in your past that has spoken to you with sarcasm that caused some sort of pain, and now that triggers it. Me saying it triggers it, and I don't know why, but it's not about me. It's not about what I'm doing to him. It's about something within him that is feeling that pain.
Yeah, I haven't been able to trace that back yet, so I don't know. I don't know what it is.
But the ego will have you believe that now his feelings of being hurt are my fault. So the ego is like, oh, well, now you hurt him, and I don't want to feel like I hurt him, so I have to prove that he's wrong. He shouldn't be hurt by that, because then he would know that I wasn't hurting him intentionally. And the ego plays these like little tricks on you, and you start rationalizing and finding ways to explain what happened so that you're not at fault, because the ego doesn't want to feel like I hurt my partner. Why would I hurt my partner? I'm not a bad person. I'm not a mean person. I wouldn't intentionally hurt him. So why would my ego accept that I did hurt him unintentionally? And one of the examples I used to use with Danny, about hurting your partner unintentionally and being willing to apologize to the person, to empathize and apologize even if you didn't intend to hurt the person, was I would say, imagine you're putting your coat on and I'm standing next to you, and as you stick your arm through the sleeve, you accidentally hit me in the face. Now, you didn't intend to hit me in the face. Obviously, when you slipped your hand through, your intention wasn't, I'm going to smack Vanessa across the face, but you did. And so you can understand that it hurts, right? Getting smacked in the face is going to hurt. And so if I tell you, ow, you hit me when you stuck your hand into your sleeve and it hurt, you can empathize with that without taking it personally, without saying, oh yeah, I did that on purpose. You can just apologize. Oh, I never meant to do that. I'm so sorry. Do you want me to get you some ice? Do you want me to, how can I help relieve that pain? Or simply an apology. And that doesn't mean that I'm holding you to this idea that you have intentionally hurt me.
Yeah. I resonate with this, Diana, because I'm also from, my mother was Irish and she has a huge family, 11 brothers and sisters. And yeah, a lot of times they are very sarcastic. Maybe it's something from my childhood that I don't remember my mother being sarcastic either to me or to others. I don't know. I don't have a clear, recollection of where this triggering comes from, but yeah, it could certainly, you're definitely right about that. Culturally speaking, some cultures just like to use sarcasm more. I think Mexicans seem like they're pretty sarcastic, too at times. So and that's kind of like a double psyop, right? So sarcasm really is an egoic kind of mechanism. It's a defense mechanism also, and it's meant to use humor, but it's still based in an ego response. It's not based on compassion. So she's having her ego is psyoping her into being sarcastic, and then my ego is psyoping me to take offense to that sarcasm. Obviously, the sarcasm is her trying to defend herself from something as well. So it's not about me. It's just about whatever is being triggered in her as well. And I think that's really probably one of the key things that it was very hard for me to learn is that when you're triggered by something, whoever the external source that's triggering you is not the problem. It's always a wound inside you that gets triggered, right? That's the problem. That's what needs to heal, is whatever that wound is. And for me, I was always like, no, it's their fault. They said something that triggered me, so obviously they're the one at fault. But if I didn't have that wound, there would have been no trigger. Either I would have taken their sarcasm as a joke, or I would have, whatever. Or I could have said, oh, wow, she's being sarcastic. She must feel hurt about something. So let me find out what that is. You okay, babe? Why are you being, you being sarcastic? What's going on?
Yeah, I think, and I'm sure that would like drop some defense mechanisms. Like, oh my God, wait a minute, he's asking me what's wrong. And I think that one of the things that right now that you were saying about taking offense to what other people say and thinking that it's about them, I've really come to appreciate this idea that everybody that we encounter, it serves as a mirror for us, whether it's to highlight something beautiful about yourself or to highlight areas in your life that need to be looked at. If somebody is triggering me, this is an area that I need to look at. What's going on here? Why was this reaction so strong? Why was I hurt by this? What part of my life is struggling that got immediately triggered by this one little comment, or by seeing something or hearing something? Sometimes even a scent can be triggering because it'll bring you back to some weird experiences. But it's never about anybody else. And as we're talking about, wanting to fix the world, especially as activists, as people who want to help other people, there's a quote, I'm not sure if it's Mother Teresa or I'm not 100% sure that it's Mother Teresa, but it was something along the lines like, if you want to change the world, go home and love your family. And the truth is, we can't change the world unless we're able to fix the dynamic that we're living. If Danny and I are at each other's throats all the time, how could we possibly expect to change anybody else out there? If we can't balance our own relationship, we'll never be able to balance a relationship with somebody that doesn't have that intimate connection that we have. And that was one of the things that in our argument, that's what I said. Danny got really triggered and really angry at the fact that I was holding him accountable. But the reason why he had made that comment to the woman was because he wanted to hold her accountable to her beliefs. And I said to him, if you are having such a hard time accepting accountability from me, and you know that I love you, you know that I'm in this with you, and that, I have your best interest in mind when I say these things, what makes you think that this woman is going to have an easy time accepting accountability from you when she doesn't know you? She doesn't know you from a hole in the wall. She's never had a conversation with you. And the truth is, some of these conversations cannot be had on the internet. We cannot have these conversations through text or through commenting on Facebook, because some of the sentences get, the wrong, they sound wrong when you read them. You misinterpret things. You might accidentally hit send before you actually write out your full thought, and then it gets misinterpreted. And so it's almost impossible to have a sincere and honest conversation on the internet.
Yeah, and there are studies about that where the text of a communication, the words, is only like 10% of the actual communication. Body language, tone, all of that is lost in online communication. And it's come to the point where it's almost exclusively how humans communicate. It's really amazing that the world isn't a lot worse than it is, based on the fact that we're basically running on fumes when it comes to how we communicate with each other. And Veronica is absolutely right. I was trying to solve a problem with the same energy that created it. And ultimately what that is spiritual bypassing. I didn't want to be held accountable by Vanessa for being nasty to this woman, but I wanted to hold her accountable for her being nasty to me. Right? Can we see that? How, it's bypassing. It's self-righteous, right? That's the epitome of self-righteous or virtue signaling or whatever other term you want to use.
And it's literally the childhood, thing that we've learned, right? Two wrongs don't make a right. Why would we think that meeting somebody with the same energy would somehow neutralize the situation? And in order for us to really heal our relationships, we have to bring it back to neutrality, to 0 point, to harmonize it. And when somebody meets us with a particular energy, if we meet them with the same energy, it's not going to neutralize it. The energy is just going to continue to increase and increase and increase. And I think the point that you made just now about our communication being almost exclusively through a screen means that so many of us are arguing about things that we probably agree with each other on. The truth is, the majority of human beings probably agree with each other on so many things. But then we go on the internet and we say things, and somebody reads it in the wrong way, adds a different tone to it, and all of a sudden we have a world full of people who think we are all at each other's throats and hate each other and disagree with each other. But if you go and talk to your neighbor in person instead of sending a nasty text because you're upset at something, you're most likely going to have a better interaction than if you have a conversation through text or on Facebook. It's exactly, like attracts like.
Absolutely. And I don't know anything about Jesuitism, but sometimes, some relationships maybe aren't worth saving, or I don't know if I would say they aren't worth saving, but sometimes a relationship can't be saved if both partners are not willing. If I had just insisted, I'm not going to allow you to hold me accountable for this, I don't want to hear it, I don't care, that would create a block in our relationship. And if I allow that block to stay there, and then I start building more blocks on top of it, if I go the opposite way, instead of being on a path where I'm trying to heal my ego so that I have less triggers, if I'm allowing my ego to build up walls in between us, eventually there's not going to be anything left for us to have a relationship. And at that point, if we stayed together because we had kids, or because we lived together and we can't afford to separate, or something like that, that could become a really toxic situation. So, if Grateful Heretic, if that's what happened with your relationship, I understand how tough that can be. We had been in a place years ago where we were almost to that point, where we had built so many walls in between us that if we had continued in that direction, we would have, it became really toxic. It got to a point that it was very toxic, but it luckily for us, we hit a breaking point where then we decided we're gonna heal this. We love each other, so we're committed to working out these issues, and we started to look inward and heal ourselves and help heal each other. And so I think we were, I'm very grateful for that. I don't know if I want to say lucky, because we made the choice to do it, but I also don't want to judge people that aren't ready to make the choice to do it, because it's hard facing your demons. And some people just aren't ready. And I don't want to cast any judgment, because for many years I wasn't ready to do it. And we've been together for a long time now. And it's only really the last 2 or 3 years that we're doing this heavy work together. I'm 43 years old. I'm like almost middle-aged. And it's finally now where I'm really starting to face my demons and actively work to heal them. So, and we're trying to teach our kids to do that, to start then, as children, so they could be, much farther along than we are.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we live in a society where we have so many distractions. We're distracted by social media, by television, by all of these things that keep us from going inward. And exactly, preventing people from actually communicating. And it's really unfortunate. We've just kind of accepted it. One of the beautiful things I think about this whole pandemic, whatever you believe about it, is that a lot of people got to stay home and actually exist in a household with their partners. So many people work outside of the home for hours upon hours, and they spend more of their day at work than they do at home with their families. And by being in the same space together for longer periods of time, I think it's creating situations where people are looking within, are looking at their communication skills. And yeah, when I was working 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, Danny and I would be texting throughout the day, and there were many times where we would misunderstand our text message conversations. It would be easier to hold on to that anger because we were speaking at each other through a screen instead of being in person. Like, we actually used to say early on in our relationship, before things got really, really bad, that we were going to have a practice called, or write a book called Argue Naked. And the idea behind that is that if you are at home naked in bed with your partner, it's a lot harder to hold onto the anger, the resentment. You're completely naked with the person. It's like you're in one of the most intimate,
vulnerable
positions you could possibly be.
And it's also it's a metaphor, right? Because it's also about like emotional nakedness, emotional vulnerability. But yeah, it's like if you're holding each other naked and hugging, it's hard to have an argument. And it's much easier to have a discussion rather than it being an argument.
And one of the things that I used to say was I love the moments in the morning when we just wake up. And one of the reasons it's my favorite time of the day is because we haven't had enough time yet to put on our masks. And the truth is, we wake up in the morning, and if we're getting ready to go to work or face the day or do whatever we have to do, we tend to put on masks. These are things that are going to prevent us from getting hurt, prevent people from making fun of us, prevent us from being vulnerable. And when you wake up in the morning, you haven't exactly had the time to do that yet, and that's one of the best times to have these conversations.
Yeah, and I think that what Grateful Heretic is saying here is absolutely true. If as individuals you don't understand that you're enough and you're whole and you have value, you don't need another person to validate you, then codependency can arise. And we were very codependent in the beginning of our relationship. So absolutely. And obviously the way to avoid codependency is to know that you are of value no matter what. It doesn't matter who you are, what your job is, whether you have a partner or not, how pretty your partner is, how much money you have. None of those things make any difference to your value as a person. We are all valuable because we're all God's children, or whatever your belief system is. I would say we all have a soul, and that soul that's the core of our value. It's our humanity. Our sovereignty is an extension of that. So yeah, I actually do want to address this. I agree to a degree. Now, I'm not a Trump fan. I don't agree with 99% of his policies, but I think you're absolutely right that if Trump said breathing oxygen was a good thing, a lot of people would start holding their breath. I think it's absolutely an irrational response. And the right way to handle tyrants like Trump, which is what I believe he is, and anyone that sits in the White House is by necessity going to be a tyrant, is with compassion and love. If we were to look at what Kanye and Kim Kardashian were able to accomplish, not by hating Trump, but by becoming friends, developing a rapport, and using compassion, they were able to get him to release a few prisoners who were being held unjustly for nonviolent drug offenses. I think that's huge. Mm-hmm. That Alice Marie Johnson was one of the ones they convinced him to let go. And after discussing things with him, he was calling Colin Kaepernick a bastard for kneeling during the anthem. And then afterwards, he was like, oh, maybe there was, and obviously he hasn't really done anything to stop police brutality, and he's still supporting the police. But that compassion, it had some effect. that he was willing to pardon Alice Marie Johnson. They changed her life. The compassion of Kanye and Kim Kardashian changed Alice Marie Johnson's life. It got her out of a cage, and she's now free. So that's huge. If we were to all treat Trump and every other tyrant out there like that, if we were able, instead of sending negative energy, we hate them, they're tyrants, or even the police, fuck the police, right? That's a lot of negative energy that a big portion of society, especially the libertarian, anarchist, like freedom movement, is directing. That's a lot of negative energy, and it's just going to metastasize and get worse. That is fueling the police state, because we push back against them, then they're going to push back harder, and for the most part, they have superior weapons. But if we use compassion to establish rapport with them and show them why these policies are anti-freedom, we can get a lot farther, I think, right? And Christ and Buddha and all of the great spiritual teachers have always said that a kind word turns away anger, that love defeats hate. And the progressives have that slogan, right? Love trumps hate. And it was supposed to be like an anti-Trump thing, and it's really true, but how many of them really practice it? Because I see a lot of people just hating on Trump, and I'm guilty of it too. I lose my patience and I get angry too, and I feel the same way sometimes. But this is a lesson that Vanessa's been trying to teach me for years. So
we'll get there.
I'm trying.
I think it's difficult. I think we've learned, if we think about it, it's a defense mechanism, right? If somebody doesn't agree with us, we hate them, we're angry at them, and we have a right to be angry at them. If they don't do what we want them to do, we have a legitimate reason to dislike them. And as somebody was saying earlier, it's meeting an energy that we want to remove with the same energy, and it doesn't work. It doesn't help. We were recently listening to Russell Brand's podcast, and he had Duncan Trussell on, and he was talking about movements where we're fighting violence with violence, and we want to replace a system. But if we replace that system with violence, then we've already adopted violence as a way to replace a violent system, and it doesn't work. We end up becoming the thing that we're trying to fight. And I think we do have to shift the strategies, shift the energy that we meet certain things with. And that's kind of how we work through our egos, is shifting that energy. If our ego wants to throw a temper tantrum, we're not going to meet our ego with the temper tantrum and saying, no, you shouldn't do this. No, you're not allowed to do this. No, you're wrong. Meeting it with that same angry energy. If we meet it with love, the ego calms down, and then we can allow it to exist without controlling our lives, without being in control of everything we say and do.
Yeah, for sure. What other ego traps? Do we have anything else on the list there?
They all kind of fall into the same thing. We're reliving childhood traumas. Yeah. One question that I heard recently that was like a good way to kind of get you out of that ego trap is when you're feeling a very strong emotion like anger or frustration, or you want to have you have this impulse reaction, is to stop and ask yourself, how old am I right now? And that might get you to a place of recognizing what is being triggered in that moment. How old do I feel right now? Do I feel like that fifth grader that was being bullied in grammar school? Or do I feel like, 36-year-old Vanessa right now in this moment having an experience? And once you're able to separate these experiences, you can respond accordingly to the situation and not respond to that fifth grade trauma.
Right.
Sometimes we're responding to a situation that has nothing to do with our fifth grade trauma. Danny having this reaction to this woman, she's probably like, what is even happening right now? Why is this guy getting so angry at me? I just made this comment. She has no idea that he's responding to his bullying in fifth grade,
Yeah, at that point, I'm not even arguing with her. I'm arguing with my fifth grade class. And it took me a long time to understand that that's what living in the now means. Being present in this moment, listening to what Vanessa's trying to communicate to me, rather than living in the past where something she says remind me of something my mom said or somebody in my class said that hurt me, and I'm reliving that trauma, and I'm missing the communication that's happening right here because I'm somewhere else. Mm-hmm. So it took me a long time to really be able to get what that meant. I had no idea what Ram Dass meant by be here now. But this is what it is. Being in the very moment, communicating, actively listening rather than listening to your thoughts. And my thoughts are loud. My internal dialogue, sometimes Vanessa's speaking to me, looking right at me, and I'm looking at her, and she'll say something, and my mind goes off on a different thought process that sometimes I'm like, oh my God, I went on this thought process. I don't know what she's even talking about now. I totally tuned out. And now I'm trying to remember, like, what were the words she just said? What was she, like, I'm trying to catch up to her before she realizes that I don't know what she's talking about. So then I can pretend, oh yeah, no, honey, I totally agree. Absolutely. But my thoughts, my ego, my internal dialogue is so loud that sometimes it's impossible for me to listen to people that are right in the room with me. It's really a struggle. It's a big struggle for me. It's very hard to, and it just really gets in the way of any meaningful conversation.
Yeah, and I think that that's also a side effect of the kind of the society that we live in with social media, right? We have Instagram. News is fed to you in 15-second increments, because that's how long our attention span is. And we have then this tendency to live in a society where we're responding to people back and forth quickly. It's all like fast. We can't stop to listen for more than 10 or 15 seconds because then we're off to the next thing. I find myself at times being interested in reading a post somewhere, and it's a long post, and if I feel like it's too long, I'm just like, whatever, I don't have time to read this whole thing. But that's part of the problem, and I catch myself now when I'm starting to get impatient, like, this was really long, I don't want to have to read the whole thing. I catch myself and I say, no, what are you rushing off to do? Read the next post? Like, what why would I do that? Why not focus on one thing at the moment and just be there and absorb it? And I think, there are many ways in which we can kind of pull ourselves out of that. Meditation is certainly helpful, and I don't necessarily think everybody has to sit at home and close your eyes and cross your legs and meditate for 20-30 minutes at a time. Sometimes taking a walk and just observing the trees, observing the flowers, observing nature, that in and of itself is meditation.
It's a practice of being in the moment, right? If you're walking down the street, instead of thinking about all the problems in your life, if you're just looking at the beauty of the leaves, of the trees, of the flowers, you're being in that moment. Nothing else matters except what's right in front of you. These flowers right in front of you, and you can look at them and just appreciate them and be grateful. That is meditation, because it's taking you out of the past. You're not thinking about the future, what you're hoping for, but you're just existing in that moment. And there's really a lot of power in that. And I do not have the discipline to meditate like that, but things like that are much easier for me. I don't have the discipline to sit for 30 minutes quietly, right? Like, I'm trying to develop that discipline, but it's hard for me. But things like that are much easier, to be able to just stop and listen to the birds, stop and observe the beauty of the moon. That's something that Vanessa has really inspired me, because she loves the moon and she loves looking at it. And honestly, I don't know that I ever really paid too much attention to it. But last night,
that's what I was going to say. Last night we were driving home and the moon looked humongous. It was so big and bright and just beautiful. And Danny was like, take a picture. And I was like, no matter how I try to take a picture, it will do it no justice. I just want to enjoy it. And he was like,
Yeah.
that's another thing that we've kind of adopted in society. We want to take pictures of everything. Hold
And
on to
post it
that moment.
online.
Yeah, and post it for everybody to see the thing that we just experienced. But in doing so, we miss that time that we could be experiencing it.
Because you're thinking about who you're going to, and maybe it's not just like a narcissistic thing like, oh, I'm going to impress everybody who follows me on social media. It might just be legitimate, like, wow, this is beautiful, I want to share this. But while you're thinking about who else you're going to share it with, you're not in the moment. You're not like actually enjoying it. So take that moment, and there will be other moments, there will be other moons. If you miss it, if you can't take the picture, it's okay, there'll be another moon tomorrow. And you can, we don't have to save these moments and like put them on social media so that we can prove they existed, so that we can remember, oh, that was a moment that I was happy. Because we can continue to have happy moments if we focus on
and I
that.
think that's part of the problem, right? This attachment to a moment, and instead of appreciating for what it is. We're not going to be happy 24/7. That doesn't, we have in our human experience, we're experiencing everything, all sorts of emotions, and it's perfectly fine to experience anger and frustration and sadness and joy and gratitude and all of these things. It's perfectly normal, but we have a tendency that when you have a happy moment, you just want to hold on to it, and you want to hold on to it so much that you miss it because you're trying so hard to hold, like, to keep it. And I think we appreciate the joyful moments. We were saying this actually yesterday. We were having dinner with some friends, and we were talking about the fact that we appreciate our relationship because we have gone to the very, what we say is like, we've gone to the depths of hell in our relationship. We've gone through some really difficult and trying moments in our relationship. We've had experiences that were horrible, and because we've seen the darkest that our relationship can go, we can swing the other way to feel the immense joy and happiness. We can appreciate the happy moments that we have because we know what it's like to be in those dark places. And I think that has shown me a different perspective in how to appreciate even the dark moments, how they serve their own purpose. One of the experiences I had when we went to Peru last year, we were hiking on a mountain, and once we got to the top of the mountain, a hailstorm just came down onto us. And Danny and I had already taken off our shoes. We were kind of grounding and wanting to experience, like, feeling the earth on our feet. And we decided to continue our hike barefoot. And I was walking through certain paths, and I would step on like stones or pebbles, and there would be some sections that were really, really rocky, and they hurt. And in that moment, as I was walking, and I would feel the pain, and then it would just kind of guide me onto a different path where it was grassier or there were less rocks. And it kind of just came to me all at once, like, wow, this is what the difficult moments are for. They kind of guide you onto a different path. They lead you to an area where maybe you wouldn't have explored if you were comfortable constantly. If we were always comfortable, how much would we be willing to explore? But it's not till you're like stripped of everything that then you have the capacity to just explore anything else out there, anything outside of the things that you know and are comfortable with. And that has increased my appreciation for the difficult moments, the uncomfortable moments, the frustrating moments. I've said to Danny, I appreciate our arguments. They are going to take us to a deeper level of our relationship. And that doesn't mean I enjoy the arguments. Sometimes they're frustrating. This past weekend was a really, really frustrating argument to hear him say, yes, I know I was in my ego. I made a choice to be in my ego, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's perfectly fine for me to let my ego have its way once in a while. And I was like, what is he saying right now? I thought it was complete insanity. And then once he said that, I was like, okay, this is his ego taking over. I'm going to take a walk. I'm going to step out for a moment and just let him hang out with his ego for a while, and I'll come back when his ego's taking a nap or something, has exhausted itself for the day.
Once my ego finished its temper tantrum and just exhausted itself to sleep.
Yeah.
There's a conversation in the comments going on about how Trump is a puppet of, I guess the Illuminati, whatever you call it, the 1%, the Illuminati. And in the same way, or that Trump is a front man. And in the same way, like, sometimes our persona, either online or out in the street, like, we put on this game face, right? This mask. And that's the front man. Our ego sometimes is the front man. And the front man's job is to protect us. I mean, obviously, Trump's, the front man in government's job is to protect the 1%, or the financial class, or whatever. And our ego is kind of like our front man protecting us, right? And it means well in that sense, but we don't have to let it take control. We don't have to let it put us into an internal police state to keep us safe, right? And that's what it's about. It's about freeing ourselves from the frontman ego and the psyops that it runs to, kind of set up a police state to protect us from being hurt.
Yeah, and I mean, that's exactly what it is. Everything that we experience externally is something that's going on internally. And a lot of us have allowed our ego to run the show and create a police state internally where we are putting up blocks, where we're not allowing things to be fully expressed, not allowing ourselves to be vulnerable with others and connect with others. And, we are seeing it play out externally as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. And that's why we can't fall into those fear-based psyop traps. Definitely. Yeah. And by responding with compassion to our ego, and to all the tyrants in the world is the only way we can disarm them. So, thank you. Thank you for joining us. That was that hour flew by.
Yeah. It definitely did.
I'm actually going to be on, coming up now at 3 o'clock Eastern time. In a few minutes, I'm going to be on Toward Anarchy. You can check out that show at towardanarchy.com. And we're going to be talking about the riots, George Floyd, police brutality, racism in America, and all of those issues. So if you're interested in that, come check us out on towardanarchy.com. And as always, please follow us on our social media. We're on all the major social media platforms, but we're also on Float and Minds.com because we do not believe in censorship or the way social media sells our data, invades our privacy. So we ask everybody, if you're not already familiar, check out Minds.com and the Float app. Both of these are anarchist run. They are anti-censorship and pro-privacy. So these are great apps. And I think we all should be reducing our dependency on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube because they are openly now calling for censorship of anything they consider fake news, right? So holistic medicine, vitamin C, and any criticism of vaccines is now considered fake news, and they're censoring this stuff.
And I think on another level, we should also be reducing our dependency on social media to communicate with our fellow human beings. So definitely go out there and talk to your neighbors. And you can shoot us an email, find us on these apps, and connect with us. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear your thoughts, suggestions on future shows. We're always looking for topics to discuss. And as always, this is a community conversation, so anything that you might even be struggling with, we'd love to hear and perhaps create a space for you to express it. If you'd love to be on the show, we'd love to have you, so definitely reach out for that.
Yeah, Veronica, we did not see your email, so I will find you in the comments on YouTube, and we'll hook up so we can just have a discussion. Thank you all so much. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. We appreciate you joining us on the Sovereign Lovestream.
And see you guys next week.
Bye.
Bye.